Welcome to the Minding the Gap podcast. I'm Paul Bakke, licensed counselor with Behavioral Sciences of Alabama, and I'm joined by Dr. David Barnhart and Summer Scott, both counselors here at Behavioral Sciences. And we are going to talk about why and what goes into a psychoeducational evaluation for attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, or some sort of learning disability. How's everybody doing today?
So far, so good.
Yeah, doing good.
Summer is especially excited to be on camera. This is her thing.
Yeah.
All right, all right. So the first thing that we do when someone has, obviously someone's having some trouble in school, having a hard time paying attention in some kind of way that would bring them to the idea that there may be a problem and motivate them to call behavioral sciences. So the first thing that we do when someone calls is we have an intake assessment where we're going to get a history. And so Dr. Barnhart, if you could talk about what all is involved in the history assessment.
Sure. History starts from the beginning, really. So we're interested in whether it's an adult, an adolescent, or a child, we're interested in their developmental history. Were there complications at birth? How were their first years in their physical and cognitive development? Were there factors that might be genetic? What kind of physical condition is the person in? Do they have any kind of disease process? So we're going to ask questions about things that include sleep. Sleep is a big deal. It's kind of a core issue in all mental health, certainly with attention and concentration. If a person's sleep is disturbed, they're going to have difficulty paying attention sometimes. Along with that, what kind of stresses is the individual experiencing in the environment? Because stress has an impact on how we process information. People who have high anxiety, for example, may not remember parts of their lives because they had a high level of anxiety. They may not have specific memories for things that they got in school or supposedly were taught in school. So all kinds of things enter in, like, were you bullied? Is there a lot of pressure to achieve? Or were you placed in a class that wasn't really appropriate for you? Was it below your ability to function and it was so boring you acted out? Or was it so difficult that you just felt lost and became anxious and depressed? So we have to look at all of those things. Is there a history of anxiety, depression, other kinds of mental disorders, such as OCD? Were there concussions in sports? How's eyesight? How's hearing? Those kinds of things. Is the individual oppositional? Do they have anger issues? There can be all kinds of physical causes. So
anything that would get in the way of focus on schoolwork and achievement in the classroom.
History is a big deal.
It's really going to get into all of those things because we want to get all the variables to really make the correct determination of what the issue is. We don't want to just go, oh, they have a hard time with attention. It must be ADHD. Let's give them some medicine. When maybe other things that's going on. So it's very thorough. All right. So once we get the history taken care of, let's talk a little bit about some assessments that are included in the evaluation, starting with the diagnostic achievement test. So Summer, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the diagnostic achievement test, there's lots of different ones. The one we tend to use is the Wechsler achievement test. But what you're looking at is basically developed knowledge or developed skills, things that you learned in school, kind of comparing to different grade levels, what they should know at this age or this grade, and trying to figure out if they've reached a certain level of material that they should be in, and going to compare that to the other tests that are more of the crystallized knowledge, crystallized intelligence versus what you've learned and what you've achieved through planned instruction or training or practice.
Because boiling it down is what they know at that point in time.
Yeah.
What they've been able to achieve at that point in time as compared to grade levels and their own ages and okay. So then the next part of it, which is pretty complicated, is the intelligence test, the IQ test. And many people think about the IQ test as, oh, it's this number, it's this number that means I'm either smart or not smart or super smart or whatever. And so I think that gets in the way of some people's thoughts about the IQ test. It's not really about that. It's about many, many more things, which Dr. Barnhart, why don't you take that one on?
Sure. Well, so an intelligence test, we do get an IQ score, and it has some value in that it tells us where a person is functioning on that day compared to other people their age in the general population. However, that's not as much of an interest to us as what goes into the IQ test and what we're measuring. And just to briefly go through some of the things, we measure verbal comprehension. Verbal comprehension is our ability to understand what's being communicated to us or what we're able to communicate to other people. One of the things you mentioned a minute ago, Summer, is crystallized intelligence, and there's some of that in this verbal comprehension, as well as we look at a person's abstract reasoning, the ability to use language to reason and communicate, and that's what we interface with people in, is verbal comprehension all the time. So you can be talking to somebody and they seem like really intelligent, but maybe they're really struggling in school, and you're going, oh, well, what's up with that? They're obviously really smart. So we look at these other things. Visual processing speed is one. About 50% of our brain is dedicated to visual processing. It's a big part of what we do. And so we're interested in visual processing because it's involved in certainly reading and math. We're processing information all the time visually. We get a measure of working memory. Turns out that working memory is one of those things that is often associated with attention deficit. Not always. Visual processing speed is often also an issue, either one or both of those. Working memory is what can you hold on to in your conscious awareness for a few seconds or a few minutes at a time. So you can see in reading comprehension, as you read from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, you have to be able to hold on to what you just read in order to comprehend the page. That's working memory. Fluid reasoning is learning something, a concept, and then being able to apply it in different situations. So very useful tool, and actually correlates very highly with what's called general intelligence when factual analyses are done for intelligence. And then perceptual reasoning is our ability to conceptualize or visualize how things might fit together in space. So we're given different problems and tasks to solve that are non-verbal. That kind of covers what intelligence testing is about.
Okay, and one of the things about someone with attention, with some attention problems, is if there's a deficit in, let's say, verbal comprehension, and someone is having a hard time understanding what's being said, it takes more mental energy to hang in there with it. And so it may show up as just not paying attention when I'm giving instructions, and it may be because it's more difficult for them to understand that. And so they just don't have the mental energy. And so the natural thing to do is to go look at something exciting on the wall. And that's an example of how some of these things that the subcategories are revealed. What we want to do is identify that so that we could have some kind of plan or intervention to deal with that may have more to do with that difficulty or that or maybe a relative weakness that may not be attention deficit.
Yeah. When we're looking at making a diagnosis, we're going to look at all the different subtests, all the different categories, because different strengths or different deficits are going to show up for different diagnoses.
Okay, and the other idea is relative weakness. We may have someone that's in the high category in one area and they're average in the other, and it might be a relative weakness, even though it's average compared to their age group.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Now moving on to the TOVA test, which is an audio and visual test that's specifically for attention. Summer, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, so like you said, 2 different variables of attention, both audio and visual. It's a pretty short test, kind of like the most boring video game you've ever played in your life. And you're gonna look at, when we're looking at the results, we're looking at different measures of attention, different things that show up. So there's like response time, where we're looking at the consistency of how soon or how late you respond to a prompt. And we're going to look at like impulsive responses. We're going to look at inattention, so like where you zoning out and you didn't respond to a prompt. And then we're going to look at like anticipatory responses, where was this person like anticipating a prompt and hitting it too quickly. So yeah. Then we take that and kind of average that out, look at the different quarters and halves, and again, comparing to like different age and gender specific groups.
And it's really incredible how the test will be able to determine based on the time of the response, even if it was after the prompt. That's too fast. It's not possible for someone to respond that fast without already anticipating and hitting the button first. Mm-hmm. So it's going to really reveal a lot of things about the person's ability to maintain attention and to control impulses, and that, just like we do, we're going to compare the results with the IQ and the achievement tests to see how those measure up. There's differences there, then we've got something to look at. Okay, anything else on the TOVA?
I would just say, I would add one piece that, it's a pretty good predictor of who has an attention deficit. Yeah. So it's able to pick out, if you have 2 groups, one group clearly does not have attention deficit, they do not have a diagnosis, and a group does, it'll pick out 80 to 90%, depending on their age, of those that have a diagnosis. So we don't use that by itself to make a diagnosis, because there's a lot more involved in making that determination. But it's a pretty good tool.
Yeah, really reliable.
I've had some people say to me, "Oh, it's on the computer. It's like a video game." Oh, my son's going to do great on that because he does really great on video games. And then I've also had kids who come in and say, and they're about to take the test, and they go, "All right, this is like a challenge," and they're excited and they're going to beat it. And then 10 minutes later, they're about to tear their hair out. They're just they just can't stay with it because it is so boring and repetitive, and there's not a lot of spaceships coming at you. There's no spaceships coming at you. you know, and so there's not a lot of stimulation that it's just hard to maintain that level of attention for 20 or so minutes.
If you have an attention deficit,
if you have an attention deficit problem, the fact that you're good at video games and really trying hard will still reveal a problem if there's an attention deficit problem. Okay, how about the Achenbach checklists, which is
this is a very comprehensive checklist, and we're getting input from parents, and depending upon the age, the student or the adult, we're getting their evaluation of a number of variables. So there's a checklist with at least 130 items on it. It's also looking at things like anxiety, depression, social interaction, a lot of different variables, including attention, concentration, achievement in a class, that kind of thing. It is, if we have an attention deficit disorder, we have to be able to demonstrate that particular disorder is manifested in more than one situation. So it's not just at school or just at home. It could be in any other set of circumstances. You got to show it, that it's at least in a couple of different areas of a person's life, and it's creating an impairment for them. They're not able to function at the level their abilities suggest. So that's what an Achenbach is all about. So teachers may fill out information, a husband or a wife may, or a boss or a coworker can also be observers and provide some information on that, how this thing gets manifested.
Okay. Another thing that we assess for is anxiety and depression. Those kinds of things can be distractions and get in the way of attention. So I want to talk a little bit about our assessments in those categories. Summer?
Yeah, I mean, we just want to make sure that it's not an anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder that's causing the inattention or the difficulty with getting schoolwork done, or procrastination or something like that. I mean, if you think about it, if you're anxious and you're sitting in class and you have all this like social anxiety or school anxiety, it's going to be pretty distracting to get in your work done. Or if you're in like a high pressure environment where you're feeling like you got to get all this homework done and there's so much of it and it never ends, I mean, that's going to be probably, or it can be really difficult to get all of this stuff done if you feel like you just can't get it all done, and it's really manifesting with anxiety. Same thing with depression. I mean, we're looking at low energy, low motivation as symptoms of depression. So if that's going on, it's going to be, again, just difficult to get work done, difficult to participate. And then you also have kind of like the self-esteem part in there as well. If you feel like no matter what you do, it's not good enough, some people decide, I'm just not going to try. And so those things are really important to assess for, make sure you've got a good assessment, whether a child or an adult, to kind of rule that out before you say, yeah, it's probably an attention or a learning disability.
Okay. All right. So those are just a summary of all the different factors that go into this psychoeducational assessment, whether it's for ADHD or learning disability, or just some kind of problem in between. Obviously, someone that is having a hard time with attention, or they wouldn't be coming to us for an assessment. So we want to find out all the different variables to look at, and it takes a while. It takes a while to get it all done, get the testing done, to be able to fuse those assessments into a report, which is what we do at the end of this process, is generate a report. So talk a little bit about our reporting process, Dr. Barnhart.
Sure. So in the reporting process, part of what we do is go over in some detail with the people who have been evaluated there. If it's a student, the student and their parents, or if it's an adult, they can bring somebody along with them, and we'll give a verbal report. We generally start by just saying this is the diagnosis, or diagnoses, as the case may be. We might also vary the particular battery of tests from time to time if we discover some other things that we need to measure. Sometimes we need to rule out some specific things like obsessive compulsive disorder or bipolar disorder or something. It may take some additional assessment, but we put all that together. There's a lot of information, as you're saying, Paul, a lot of information that goes together, and we write a report. And where there are accommodations, we'll also list accommodations. Accommodations are things that could include more time to take tests for a student, or some flexibility in assignment length, or where the person might be seated in a classroom. Schools generally are pretty good about making accommodations for attention deficit or a specific learning disability. And you might be surprised to hear that colleges and universities are really good at it. They're the best generally. And I think part of that is because that's where a lot of research takes place. And so they're on top of it. And they want their students to be successful. They want them to stay in school and pay tuition, for example. So it's a nice, it's a very accommodating environment when somebody has a specific need. So yeah, so we put it together in a report, and then that's typically good for about 3 years if a person needs accommodations.
All right. Well, that's our process of psychoeducational assessments in a nutshell. I think we may do another one on to get a little bit into some testing that we do, especially IQ testing tends to be pretty in depth. So we may do another one that's specifically on that for anybody that's interested in learning that. But this is a lot for anybody who's watching this. This is, if you're not thinking about this all the time, it can get confusing. And so we wanted to put this together so that people could be able to watch it, take notes on it, and really understand if your child or you or someone that you care for is considering getting testing done, to really know what you're getting into and really understand the process. And then to be able to go back and watch it again if you need to, because it's for many people, even I'm not real good at understanding a lot of this stuff. I need a lot of repetition to understand it, because it's just not how we really have discussions every day. So hopefully this is helpful for people who are considering this to really understand the process. Final thoughts.
It's a lot. It's a lot, but we have a complicated existence, and we really need all the tools that we can muster to be able to go through these different mile markers in our development. We want to have the best schooling we can get, and we want to be able to achieve our maximum potential. So we have a lot of choices, and we're not constrained to just a few choices.
Right. And we want, the bottom line for us is we want to give information to parents and people who are getting tested, and teachers and people who are working with the people that are getting the assessments done, to be able to give them the best opportunity to be successful. And when we say accommodations, we're really meaning, all right, this is how they best learn. This is how you're going to get the best out of them to maximize their potential.
Good point.
And because everybody learns different ways, everybody has some kind of weakness, and that doesn't mean that they're broken or that they're defective or not smart. It just means we need to have a strategy, and this is what it's all about. It's about coming up with a strategy to help somebody go, all right, school and learning is, I can do this this way. And then like Dr. Barnhart said, there's a lot of ways to do that.
Yeah,
All right, well, we'll go
that's-
ahead. Go ahead, Summer.
Oh, I was just going to say, there are other things we might add or take away to this, depending on, what people show up with and what their symptoms are. But that's the bottom line, is for whatever they're going through, this helps us understand the way that they best learn and what they need to be successful in their own way.
All right, well, very good. Hopefully that answers a lot of questions that you may have had about this. Hopefully this was helpful. And we want to thank you for joining our Minding the Gap podcast and YouTube experience. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.